You don't need bigger teams or more locations to grow. You need smarter systems. Now, in this episode, we're going to talk with someone who's turned data and AI into daily operation tools that help restaurants cut waste, forecast demand, and scale profits without guessing.
Welcome to Fortify Live with your host, Saeks.
Joining me today is Matt Wampler. He's the CEO and co-founder of Clear Cogs. That's a tech company helping restaurants, QSRs, and fast casual. We'll get into what it is, but take the guesswork out of prep, out of inventory, scheduling time in real time, and leveraging the power of AI in a way that's much different than what you might understand. So Matt, welcome to Fortify Live.
Ford, thanks for having me.
Well, I know in the green room, we met and we said, well, hey, who's our listener and what's this about? And I know you cater to, fast casual and quick serve restaurants and full service dining and fine dining and everything in between. But for those listeners out here today, we're live right now on Facebook and LinkedIn and YouTube and a few other places. And the audio from this episode becomes the Business Growth Show podcast. So we're all about business. So we interview entrepreneurs, we learn about their story, and then we also learn about their ideal client. How do they actually maximize it? So Matt doesn't know what I'm going to ask. I don't know what I'm going to ask. Actually, I kind of do. But Matt, welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure to be here. I appreciate you having me on.
So Matt, tell our listeners, what is Clear Cogs? Now, for those of you listening, you can go to clearcogs.com to learn about him. And it's Matt Wampler. But Matt, tell our listeners, and we got listeners from all different variations here in business, what is Clear Cogs?
Yeah, Ford, fundamentally, we believe that when a restaurant knows its future in advance, it makes better decisions. Better decisions, smoother days, more profits. We started out doing revenue forecasting, sales forecasting, and predictive prep. And slowly we've become this demand platform. You're almost your restaurant co-pilot. How do we get the 20 or 30 decisions that really matter to your operation right every day? The bagel maker, how many bagels do I need to bake this morning? What needs to be sesame versus everything? How many briskets do I smoke tonight for the barbecue place so that, I'm not running out, but I'm also not wasting that barbecue, right down to what should my labor budget be for tomorrow?
Well, I think that's a great asset because you found something that the biggest challenge for having a restaurant, which is that predictive forecasting, right?
Hey, it's a business where if you count the pennies, the dollars take care of themselves. And if you get these $5 decision, $10 decision, days right, or the decisions right, that ultimately ends up being the difference between going out of business or, giving your employees raises and making the bank payment.
Well, I know when you talk about systems, so back in the day, probably before you were born, I worked with a developer and we created a scheduling program that would allow that. This was pre-internet. This was pre-internet. So this is like 19 maybe 90, because the internet was like 94.
Windows 98. You at least have Excel back then, right?
Yeah. So we were using Excel, and here's what this guy did. I had a really smart guy. I ran a business incubator company, and the guy came to me and he said, I've got this idea, because I'm an idea guy that helps shorten the sales cycle and bridge the gap between value and an ideal client. So he came to me with this idea, and he said the biggest challenge that restaurants, I didn't even know what the term fast casual was back then, or QSR, but he came to me and he said, I've got these restaurants that I'm working with, and the biggest problem they have is scheduling. They either have too many people on the clock or not enough people on the clock, and like he gave me this whole thing, and I'm like, how in the hell? I would hate to do that. Well, he created an algorithm, and he was using Excel and macros where every person had a profile of when they were available, what their ideal times were. And then he had another Excel spreadsheet that had the demand of when they needed how many people. And already know you're light years ahead, so you already get the concept, right? And so he came up with this thing, and then we sold it to restaurants. It was just an Excel spreadsheet, but we were selling it for like 10 grand or 20 grand. I can't remember. And this was back in the 90s before the internet. But those restaurant owners, we could show them how maximizing their labor could make them more profitable. Now that's like me telling you about a grain of sand and you have a whole beach. But that's like a precursor to what you're doing.
It's the right thread. And by the way, right, you fast forward a decade from when your friend and you were working on Excel and macros. And that was me. I was a Jimmy John's franchisee using Excel spreadsheets to manage this. And before we even went to go launch the company, I called my cousin who's got some restaurants as well. And I asked him, what are you doing now? Because I've been out of the game for 5 years. He's like, Matt, we use your Excel spreadsheet. In fact, it's so great that, all the other franchisees I've been giving it to, they use it as well. You're talking, you fast forwarding decades, and the industry is still largely unchanged.
That's really cool. And just for everybody listening, it's Matt Wampler. He's the CEO and co-founder of Clear Cogs. So the word clear and cogs.com. Check him out online. And also, he's also the host of his own podcast, very popular, called The Restaurant AI. I had the name down here. So tell us about your podcast so I don't mess it up. But this is live, everybody.
Well, look, I think that one of the most interesting things that's happening right now is this technological wave of AI. It's reshaping the entire fabric of society and will for the next 5 or 10 years. And I think that in such a people-centric, hospitality-focused industry like restaurants, the evolution of, or the collision of those two forces is going to be really, really interesting. And I think it stands to transform the entire industry from one that is low margins with high turnover to a far more sustainable one. So, we bring in operators and the technologists building this, these new systems, and the venture capitalists that are funding them, all to give their perspective on where this is going, how it's unfolding, what's working. It's just following this continuing story that's transforming an industry.
So give the name of your podcast again, because we do have a lot of quick serve restaurants as listeners and full service and fine dining. And then I want to ask you a question about that with AI. So what's the name of it? So where can they find your podcast?
It's you can find it wherever you listen to your podcast. It's a very simple name. It's the Restaurant AI Podcast. If you want to know about Restaurant AI, you go to the Restaurant AI Podcast.
All right. Thank you for doing that. Sorry about the screwing up the shameless plug there. All right. So let's go back to the concept of AI. And so, for those of you listening, I found, Matt, that people come, when it comes to AI in business, they come from two different perspectives. And I'd love to hear your perspective on this. They're either completely overwhelmed. They've used ChatGPT a few times, but they don't really know. And they're sitting on the sidelines, and it's evolving so quickly. Like even in the past week, new things are coming out. AI agents are coming out. Sora's coming out. Like, it's just amazing how fast things are moving. So they're either in one camp, they're confused. The other camp is where they've used these tools and now they're dangerously overconfident that they think they understand it. And so that they're taking responses and they think maybe on a scale of 1 to 10, they're a 10 when they're really just a level 1 or 2 because they don't know what they don't know. And so they're approaching this different. And what I like about what you're doing is you're taking the guesswork out. And what the real value of the service, I believe that what you guys are offering is that they're allowing them to be more profitable, to spend more time on the real currency, which is the human connection and the customer experience.
Yeah, I mean, it's that simple. How do we use technology to handle the number crunching of the business, the inventory, looking over reports, analytics, all the things that you have to do to be a successful restaurant? AI can handle those so that we can empower our people to spend more time on the people side of the business, training, inspiring our teams, taking care of our guests. Because, fundamentally, we're here to provide an experience, in a restaurant. And, that's never going to be outsourced to AI. That's something that's still a very deep human connection.
Yeah. And I think that what you're offering is a huge opportunity because, I've had 17 different companies, mainly in manufacturing. I've invented products, I've got patents, and I've sold through every channel of distribution. And I've worked with a lot of restaurant brands. And obviously as a keynote speaker, I've opened up the keynote for Subway all the way down to people that have just 100 units. And I would not touch a restaurant with 100-foot pole. Like I play poker on Friday nights with these guys, and we go to Outback Steakhouse every Friday. And, they've got a line out around the door and they've got thousands of employees. And I'm just thinking to myself, there is no way that I would want to manage these people, manage the food costs, and I'm a pretty decent business person. I wouldn't touch it because of those complications of what you're talking about, the food costs, the spoil, the inventory, the labor, the reduced time, all those different things. And it's really interesting because I would have thought by now that they'd have it figured out. But even when I work with these brands on the side that I talk about, which is how do they get more customers, right? I don't talk about the operational side like you do. It's amazing that the brands haven't solved some of those problems. They've focused on their company and their brand, but they haven't really helped them solve it. So I really see that niche. What resistance have you had when people, I mean, I would think it's like shooting fish in a barrel because they have these problems. What do they do if they don't use you?
Yeah. So, by the way, it's even worse on the operations side. When it comes to getting customers in the door, that's a revenue function.
Right.
And when it comes to revenues, you look at most brands, franchised organizations, they're making all of their money on royalties, a cut of revenues. So that is a higher priority in a lot of ways. You know, when we look at operations side of things, they tend to delegate the responsibility to who's closest to the customer. You know, so as Jimmy John's franchisee for like a decade, you know, my job was to know exactly, have my finger on the pulse of the operation, to know, you know, what events are going on and what's going to happen if it rains and, you know, if Billy's going to, you know, call out. But that learned intelligence I had didn't scale to running multiple restaurants, right? And we can use technology today to do that. I mean, hell, we've got AI landing autonomous rockets on ships and driving cars. It can tell you how many briskets to smoke tonight for tomorrow.
Yeah, I just think I think the world is changing so quickly. I mean, I'm a business. I looked at the lens of AI through business. I've written a couple books on it, but it's not about the books or anything else. It's always about the lens of AI. Like, is this going to help me make better decisions? Is this going to save me time? Is this going to free me up to spend time on the highest and best use time? And for me, deals don't happen before dialogue. So, you know, I need to be having conversations. Well, if I can take time and use AI to leverage other pieces of my business, then I have more time to do that. And like for me, I also run a digital agency. I run a company called primeconceptsgroup.com. That's for marketing automation, digital funnels, and the done for you stuff. Because when I speak on business and marketing and branding, a lot of these brands, even bigger brands, are looking at ways to do it. Or if I speak at their conference helping their franchisees, well, then the brand hires me because they want to help with their chief development people to help them sell more franchise. At the end of the day, it's marketing, right? It's business growth. But it's interesting because, you know, I see this as a cataclysmic, which is a big word for me, a kid from the projects. I just think it's transforming everything that I just think that a lot of people are still sitting in the dark. Here we are years into AI. It's been around more than just when ChatGPT came out. But I think it's a cataclysmic shift, but it's a very positive one. I'm not worrying about Skynet taking over and, you know, the AI run everything. But I think that if you're sitting on the sidelines right now and you're listening to this episode, your real action step is you got to be open-minded, you got to be coachable, and you got to ask the right questions.
Yeah, I think that's all fair. I think one of the things that gets glazed over a lot is it really removes barriers. So if I'm a general manager and I don't like going through reports and having to read, you know, every little number and comma and how it works. AI is really good at taking large amounts of information and being able to actually turn it into something actionable, useful for that general manager. I can ask a question, I can get an answer, and it'll speak to me in my language, not in the language of data scientists.
So your ideal client is restaurants, fine restaurants, everything up and down. So I'm a strategic partner in a franchise brand, helping them grow. They've only got like 30 units, but they're in a mall, so it's called Cookie Dough Bliss, and they sell cookie dough ice cream type things. I'm not trying to pitch the product, but I'm just the CEO I know has trouble with inventory and management. Is this something that you're staying in the lane and really just working with the restaurants because of the bigger problem, or is this also something where somebody that runs a strip mall business that's trying to manage these same things? Because they're not really a restaurant, but in a sense they are, because they're serving food type items.
Look, one of the hardest things about being a startup is you have limited resources and a lot to do. And so we tend to stay in our lane. Knowing the future is applicable to almost any business, we specialize on how to take that information and turn it into operational intelligence in restaurants, right? So we are very vertical specific.
That's what I like to hear, because it's when you know who your ideal customer is, you really create a much better experience. What is a lesson that when you got out of Jimmy John's and you went in and you became the CEO and the co-founder of this company, what's something that really surprised you that was either a big ha-ha? So something that you got in thinking A and it turned into B.
Well, I actually originally got into this thinking that we would do automated price increases, not dynamic pricing, but we'd come in almost as a consultant, pull all of your data, figure out your demand elasticity curve, and give you recommended prices, because it was something I struggled with. I think the thing that surprised me the most was, and I brought my co-founder Osa in, we went and did all these customer interviews. And the customers would all say, I need a graph of fill in the blank. And I'd say, that makes total sense. We should give them a graph of this. My co-founder would be like, no. Why do you want the graph? And they'd give a reason. And then he'd ask again, why? And he'd give another reason. And sure enough, if you kept asking why, every restaurant ended up answering the question the same way. I don't know who's going to walk in the door tomorrow. And because I don't know who's going to walk in the door, I make inefficient decisions around what to order, who to schedule, what to prep. And my managers are all stressed out because they don't know what's going to happen the next day, right? They're always reacting. And we said that is a core fundamental issue that we can go in there and solve. And I think, the issue stemming from that core problem was a surprise. It was also a surprise to see that it wasn't being solved by anybody in the industry. I mean, this is a business podcast, right? Biggest red flag you should have is we're not that smart. Somebody else has to have looked at this and come up with a reason why not.
I tell you, that happens to me multiple times a month. I mean, I'm doing these AI master classes right now where I get about 1,000 people opt in. They're free. I do them about every 90 days. And then probably 400 people show up because, a lot of people sign up and don't show up. And then out of that 400 people that show up, a bunch, sometimes if they're a brand, they'll bring me in to speak to their organization, but they'll also bring me in to help them integrate AI solutions. And I'm not trying to open up a whole AI agency and do all those things, but it's just even setting up custom GPTs for them. I was doing it for free because it was so easy to do. And what I realized, and there's an old story that I learned a long time ago, because, I'm a kid from the projects and I grew up in foster care and things, but I was self-started. And I remember the story about people will pay more for information than they will anything. And the story is there's this lady driving down the street and she's got to get to daycare to pick up her kids, and her car starts sputtering, and she just makes it into an auto place. And she says, hey, I've got to go get my kids, and my car's not working. And the guy says, hey, it's going to be an hour. I've got a bunch of people ahead of you. And she said, look, isn't there something you can do? And he says, for $75, I'll put you to the front of the line and I'll help you. She says, great. So he goes over the car. He does some minor checking. He opens up the hood, takes off the fuse box cover, changes the master fuse, and says, okay, that'd be $75. And she said, what? Well, how much was the fuse? And he said, the fuse was $1. And he said, well, then why are you charging me $75? He said, look, the fuse is $1, but it took $74 to, years of experience to know where to put the fuse. And a lot of people have used that story, or one about knocking on the machine and the machine runs better. I mean, it's an old story, but it has to do with value for value. And so I was doing these custom GPTs, giving them away for free. And then I had these brands call me and I'm like, okay, I'm going to charge $5,000 to do this. Now, I was surprised at how many people, and I'm putting this out on the podcast for those listeners, I'm okay with it. But what I realized is, even though they could do some of these things themselves. So the reason I told that story is for everybody listening out there, and you look at your business, yes, you can use AI to solve your AI problems. You could probably set some systems up or some workflows. You could use make.com or N8N, or now you can use AI agents, and you could come up with some of the solutions. But that's not really the highest and best use of your time. So just like what Matt's done with his company is because he's got the experience in the industry as a franchisee and as a Jimmy John's, owner, he's got the power because he's worked with all these different brands. And that's the same thing for me. What makes me applicable to go in and speak to brands on business growth is I've been in franchising for 34 years. So I've worked with hundreds of brands, and I've learned from them what works and what doesn't, just like you working with these. So it's scaling, right? So you can do it yourself, but you got to scale.
Well, and I think that speaks to one of the biggest issues when it comes to AI. This is a new tool. Restaurants in particular are figuring out, how do I wield this? And their core focus, is the operation of the restaurants, not running a technology firm.
Exactly.
Right. So finding the right firm that'll come in and hold your hand and take you through the process, it goes a long way into getting the right results.
It certainly does. So when you think about scaling across multi-unit or multi-franchise brands, how do you ensure consistency in the forecast? So let's say you're a multi-unit owner. Is it something where they implement it per location, or can they take the data and use it across all their units?
All right. And this is where AI comes in and really change the game. So when we onboard a brand, it's a brand, not a location. Right. So onboarding a brand with one location versus 100, it's the same process for us, right? It's speccing out what are the 20 or 30 decisions that you need each day. What do you need to see on your cheat sheet? For the bagel maker, it's probably, in the morning, this is how many trays of plain bagels I need to bake. And this is how many trays of everything bagels. For the barbecue place, how many briskets do I smoke tonight for tomorrow? What do I need to have at shift change? It's 2 hours prior to close. Do I need to bake another cycle of bread? We sit down with the brand and spec out what those are for their brand. Usually it's taking their current workflow, whatever they currently look at for prep or labor, digitizing it and turning it into a system. Now, that's just the setup. So now we've spec'd out, if you can imagine, almost that Excel spreadsheet, right? I've got all the inputs, they're made in there. AI is really good at pattern recognition. If you ever get on Google and start typing in a question, it autofills the rest of the question. That's AI predicting what is the next word that's likely to be in this question. And today it's so good that I get annoyed when it doesn't automatically recommend.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. ChatGPT is the same thing. It's just so good that it literally will predict not only the question, but the entire answer, to the point it'll write you a chapter of a book, right? We do the same thing when it comes to demand data, right? I'm selling X number of ounces of chicken every 15 minutes for the past 10 years. How does the day of the week and the time of the day and the weather and what's on your menu affect what my chicken usage is going to be in the next 15 minutes, day, week? And AI will do this for every ingredient at every location, every day. And it'll do it on their data, not the brand's data, but what is going on at this store.
I think that's just such a cool idea. As an entrepreneur myself, I look at this and I'm just like, man, that was really, really profound. And also, the competitive advantage that you have being in that niche and being able to solve that solution, because at the end of the day, like you said, the franchise owner is wearing so many different hats, everything from operations to staffing to leadership to marketing to sales, the local, all the different things that they have to do to run their business. And that if you can come in and help solve it, it's really a free service to them. I want to be
one less thing
transparent.
to think about, right?
Yeah.
It's peace of mind. We literally judge our product not by how elegantly we can report the things that went wrong in your operation, but how many days go right? Can we get 2 week streak where everything goes right? Because when things go right, the employees are happier, you make more money, you grow. And when things go wrong in restaurants, it's just utter chaos.
Yeah. I spoke for a franchise brand, and I always mystery shop beforehand. And I went to this one, and they had half of their lobby closed off. And I said, what the hell? And you've got all these open tables, but you're not seating people. You've got people in the waiting room. And he said, well, we found out that if we seat them, but we're not able to get to them, they're more upset if they're sitting at the table and not getting served than if they're waiting to be, so if they wait and then they sit down and then they have this great experience. I said, well, what's the problem? He said, I can't find employees. He said, I'm in an area where there's 7 different fast food or quick serve restaurants in my, area, in his the shopping area. He said, people don't care. It's hard to find, attract, and retain top talent or frontline workers because they can come in. And I told my manager, would they mind sweeping because they didn't sweep? And she said, F you, and threw the broom down. And I'm like, how did you lose your manager? He said, because the person knows they can walk right across the street and go get a job at another location. And what I like about what you're doing is you're allowing them to take the time off of stuff that the owner, the manager, general manager would have done, where they can actually develop those young leaders and those frontline staff so that they're staying not just because of pay, but they're actually helping an intrinsic. So my point is, it's a long road to a tiny house here to get here. But the point is that they're able to free up time to where they can actually develop their staff more, and then that reduces turnover. So it's an intrinsic effect, a ripple effect.
Yeah, I get the people, focusing on the people side of the business. And I think that one of the other interesting things that's happening is the first wave of predictive analytics into restaurants was, how do I take my current workflows, how I run my business, and do it more optimally? The second wave is, if I know the future with a high degree of accuracy, I can change the way my business runs to be more efficient. I can change my operations. Let me give you a good example. We see a lot of batch prep. I will prep sauces for the next 3 days. And you'll see restaurants prepping every sauce every day because they really don't know how much they should have. And they're throwing too much out, or they're running out, right? When you have a high degree of accuracy, you can all of a sudden have sauce days, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, right? And I can optimize my prep labor so that I get the right people in the door on the right days with the right amount. And all of a sudden you're able to kind of start making changes to the operation structure around predictive analytics. It's really exciting.
That's so amazing. I'm going to give you a chance to take a drink of water while we hear from our sponsor.
Can't cut through the online chaos? This episode is powered by Ignite Visibility, the nation's expert in ROI-driven digital marketing. We help over 90 leading franchise brands and 2,500 locations outrank competitors and convert more customers. Ready to stand out and grow? Claim your free digital marketing audit at ignitevisibility.com. Ignite your growth.
And we're back. All right, so Matt, what do you see on the future? What's really exciting you about your business going forward?
Look, I think that, it's kind of what we go back to. How do we divorce the hospitality side of the business from the cold business analytics? Because right now, restaurant brands that win have mastered the cold analytics of the business. That's why you see some of these chains. They're just growing with not the world's greatest food, right? I think that all of us get into this business for the people, for the hospitality, to create those magic moments. AI is never going to do that, but it can do the cold business analytics. And so I think what really excites me at the end of the day is this is an industry that we as a nation love. We have an emotional attachment to restaurants. They're not doing very well right now. Like, restaurants are not doing great. And inflation, rising food costs, rising labor, increased regulatory, like, it is so hard to be a restaurant today. But I do think that, as this wave of AI comes through, we're going to be in a position where we can start to focus on the things we love, that people side of the business, allow technology, AI, machine learning to pick up some of the routine tasks, the cold business analytics of it. And I think we walk away a proactive industry that is fundamentally changed, like right down to the profit margins.
That's so amazing. I'm curious to know, as a company, like, I won't call it a SaaS company, but as a company that's delivering services like you, have you during the development process had to hone in scope creep or pare down the features? And let me tell you why I'm asking this question. Years ago, I read a book called Rework, and Rework was by the company who created Basecamp and 37 Signals. And basically, they were a technology company, and their whole system was, look, they can add a bunch of bells and whistles into their system, but if it's too complicated, then the user doesn't use it. And so they resisted adding things. And I've really used that over the years because, I've had my own different tools and things that I've used for brands for identifying local markets and site location and, marketing brand and messaging. And I've used that. So in yours, is there something that, people came up with that you thought maybe was a good idea, but you held back on?
Constantly. I love ideas. Like I like chasing shiny objects. My co-founder's the far more practical of the two of us. I think when you sit and you listen to customers talk, there's what they say, there's what they want, and then there's what they need. And rarely are all three the same. We found that if you can just stay focused on what they need, the restaurants are pretty practical, right? The shiny bells and whistles that don't really matter, the tech for tech's sake, it doesn't last. What we do is incredibly intimate with the brands we work with, right? If we give a bad number, somebody has a really bad day. So these are long-term relationships. We run their predictive analytics as a partner. So, sure, we definitely do some customized things for various brands, but we try and keep it pretty simple. I think the last thing I'll say on it is it's really hard when you're doing predictive analytics because you basically build a crystal ball. I can answer any question you want. The real thought behind it is do I want to build the infrastructure, the productization around answering that question for every brand, because every brand's different.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I've always had the philosophy, when in doubt, leave it out. I invented products in the sporting goods industry, and I spent $250,000 developing this product, and it was a childcare product, and it had quick release wheels and ergonomic. It had all these features and everything, and it was probably the top of the line of this type of product. But what we found when Huffy competed with us and broke my patent, blah, 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 is that even though we had a better product, the consumer didn't need all those bells and whistles to be able to hit the target. Yes, it would have been cool, but it didn't significantly add enough value that it made it worth doing. And so it's the same thing with any solution. So as you're listening to this as a viewer or a listener, it's the same thing.
Ford, I want to get your take on this.
Yeah, so go for it. You run your podcast, so let's go for it. Yeah, I'll be a guest.
One of the things that's changed really recently is, the rise of AI coding, autonomous coding agents. We used to go looking at building out, MVPs, and you would go talk to a ton of customers to try and figure out what it is that they want before you ever start building anything.
Yes.
Today, I can go have, Claude or Cursor or any of these start spinning up demos that aren't like phantomware, but that actually work really quickly, which means now all of a sudden, I can show a customer exactly what they want. It almost makes it even easier to go down different paths. Do you see that? How do you manage that and avoid that creep?
All right. So Matt, I appreciate the question. So my digital agency used to have 55 employees, and that was a lot of hungry mouths to feed, right? You got to designers and video editors and copywriters and project managers and client specialists and salespeople. I had a whole bunch of crap going on. And in the last 3 years, I now have 4 employees. We're doing double the work. And I used to, the thing that would bother me a lot, if you've listened this long into the podcast, the thing that really freaking pissed me off was hiring a web developer or hiring a programmer, because they always think they're the smartest people in the room. They don't follow instructions. I'm bashing web developers right now. So you can go give me crap in the comments. For the purpose of this episode, this is for educational and informational purposes only. I'm not giving you legal advice. This is just me answering Matt's question. So the biggest thing was hiring these high paid web developers, right? Okay, so let's fast forward to your question. So now I use a program called lovable.dev. I go to Perplexity. I create the app instructions in detailed and comprehensive interface, user interface, UX instructions. And I'm able to produce an app. So let me tell you the one I just did. It's if you go to concept to clip.ai. So concept, the word, no, content. It's just so brand new. I don't even know my own URL. It's content to clip, content, the number 2 clip.ai. What this does. And so in my business, speakers, authors, they create all these books and they create all this intellectual property, but they can't repurpose it. So I created their digital brain, which is something they could have done on their own, but this is an app that I did in Lovable. It's got my own domain and everything else. I deployed it. I'm using it as a lead magnet, a bonus for my high end, and then I'm selling it for $1,000. And what it basically does is it allows authors to upload their book. It takes all their chapters, parses it out into scripts, and then it sends it to HeyGen and creates their digital twin. And literally, I did the whole thing and programmed it. So I went to Lovable, and I know there's other tools out there. Do your own due diligence for anybody listening to this episode. But I went there and I said, you know what? Let's change the name of it. Let's change the user interface. Give me an admin dashboard. Make this better. And since
for anybody that's listening that hasn't dealt with developers, just changing the button, and the component there. These are things that take days.
I literally this morning, prior to this episode, because I was on Zoom when you first joined the green room for this episode, and I was literally changing the branding and adding a new feature and add it to the admin. So basically what happened was all the users came in and it kept all the user data and it gave me their name and email. But I'm like, what if I want to block people? Can you add a functionality that I can go into the admin area and add a new column that I can just hit block? Shit. It just did it. And I remember working with my developers. I would have had to spend a meeting and then listen to all the pushback and listen to the overtime. And the world that I was, and I'm not a programmer. I'm not a programmer at all. I mean, I understand systems and dynamics, and I'm a critical thinker. But the ability to go from idea to concept to a function, like this isn't a wireframe that I would have to pay someone to develop. It actually developed the tech. So I know, and if I can do that and it cost me $100 or a month for the tokens or whatever, oh my God, I would have spent $50,000 to prototype in 6 months. And I did it in an evening. Like, it's nuts.
Well, so now you've got this power. You can do this. And by the way, it's in a lot of ways democratized. You used to have to speak the programming language and be able to do that. So there was always an intermediary between you and the product. Now you have access to the product and can build whatever. You have fire. How do you not let that fire catch everything on fire, right? Because, if scope creep was a problem before, now, you just went from a bow and arrow to like an automatic machine gun. Like it's a paradigm shift.
Well, and that's what happened. So as a content producer, I have a digital twin and avatar in HeyGen. I have my voice in 11 Labs because 11 Labs does a better voice, and the quality is actually pretty good. And for some repurposing some of my content,
you are here right now. This isn't your avatar.
Oh yeah, this is actually me. That's why I custom it to the end of the episode, right? But it's interesting because I built that originally just to create scripts and content, but then I thought, well, why can't I connect it to HeyGen and just have it create the video? And then I'm like, so then I just asked it to do it, and it built the interface, told me how to get the API, and so it built the whole thing, right? And then I thought, well, most people's HeyGen's account have a maximum of 5-minute scripts, so make sure you put some type of measurement on when they use the script to make sure it meets the variables. Like, all I had to do is keep talking to this thing, and literally it built the whole thing, and it's beautiful. So go to content-to-clip.ai. You guys can go see what we built. And it's just when you look at the world through that lens, and me as an entrepreneur, I've always, and you said it earlier, people, what they say, what they want, and what they need. I've always found, people say for an entrepreneur, find a need and fill it. And I think it's gone both to find a want, find a need, because people will do more what they want, not necessarily what they need. So you have to meld the two. And now with AI, you can do it. So I'm not a programmer, but I'm developing apps. Is there a better one than Lovable that you like? Or don't give away secret sauce or anything like that. But I'm just saying.
I like Cursor. So we use Cursor AI. But yeah, going back to the point of creep, I think the problem with what you just said is you went through 3 steps and iterations and never talked to your end user. Because you can develop so quickly, you can run past the steps of true discovery and start heading down a path that may not be optimal.
And I think it's the same with people who start using AI tools, whether they're using Claude or Copilot or Gemini or Perplexity, or whether they're using, Perplexity's new Comet browser, and now Gemini has one and ChatGPT has one now too. I think what the problem is that overconfidence that they start taking that human element out. And so for all of our listeners out there, what we're both saying is just because you can doesn't mean you should, and that you need to make sure that it's still in alignment with what's going to really serve the best customer. So always look at it through the customer experience, because you can, again, that's where that book Rework really sticks in the back of my mind is, they had all their customers saying, well, Monday.com does this and Microsoft Project does this. They're like, look, we don't want to do that. We're going to stay in this. And they became, the leader in it because it was simple and easy to use. And I think that's the same thing. What you're saying is really look at through the lens of the customer.
Yeah, I think the moral of the story is AI has simplified how we get from point A to point B on product development. But with that simplicity comes a whole lot of complication on strategic direction. And are we going the right direction?
Absolutely. So as we wrap up here, just a question. If you could give our listeners, a restaurateur or franchise leader, what should they start doing immediately to use AI without needing to be a tech expert? Now, we're not talking about, yes, you should hire a company to come in and do it, but what should those individuals do listening to leverage this power?
Yeah, look, you got to start somewhere, right? We all know this world is going much more into predictive analytics, going towards AI. You see it popping up everywhere. You don't want to get left behind. Start small. Start with something like sales forecasting, right? If you're a restaurant on toast, for instance, you can get on and enable Clear Cogs. We provide a free product that will give you daily sales forecasts, right? It is low lift, cost you nothing, but you start to kind of get to see the future and where it's going and come along on that journey. So I'd say start small, work your way up. I think the other piece of advice I give is this: don't rush out and buy AI to buy AI from a vendor, right? And before you do, go to ChatGPT. Ask it if ChatGPT can do it. If ChatGPT can't do it, tell it all of the tools you have, your current tech stack, and ask if any of those tools can do it. Because I think something like 70% of the functionality of most software systems are not even utilized, by the people that have them, right? So you may find you already have that functionality, and ChatGPT can help you get it set up. And then, and only then, if ChatGPT can't do it, your other softwares can't do it, then think about whether I want to build this internally or I want to outsource it. But, don't just rush in and buy something, because there's a lot of hype, over promises, and software that's just basically ChatGPT that they're going to charge you more money for.
Yeah, I would agree. That's a great place to end the episode. I think start small, get complicated later. I like going to Perplexity because it reads Reddit and Substack, and it uses other AI models so when I'm doing research, I'll go to Perplexity, but if I'm doing Workhorse, I do it in ChatGPT. But again, this is what we're talking about today.
Exact same thing for me as well. And if we're doing coding, we go to Claude.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Ford, thanks for having me, man. This was fun.
All right, everybody. So thanks for tuning in to Fortify Live. We're all about accelerating your business growth. Until next time, keep innovating, keep growing, and keep fortifying your success.
Thank you for tuning in to Fortify Live. Make sure to like, comment, and share this episode on your favorite social media platform. And don't forget to subscribe to the Business Growth Show podcast, available wherever you get your podcast streaming fix. We air weekly at 11 a.m. Central Time. So until next week, keep pushing the boundaries and never stop growing.